If God knows everything, how can free will exist? Christianity teaches that God is omniscient. He knows everything. But in order to truly know everything, God must know what will happen in the future. If he didn't, he wouldn't know everything. But if God knows what will happen in the future, then it seems like the future is already determined. It's already set. And human beings can't have free will, since in order to have free will, we'd have to be able to change the future. And if the future's set, we can't change it. It appears then like God's omniscience is in direct contradiction to the idea that human beings have free will. And this would seem to create a problem for Christians, who believe both that God is all-knowing and that human beings have free will. So how can these two seemingly opposing doctrines be reconciled? To answer this question, I will turn to one of the most influential texts in the history of Christianity, Boethius's Consolation of Philosophy. Boethius was a 6th century Roman philosopher and a devout Catholic. When he was imprisoned under King Theodoric of Rome under suspicion of treason, Boethius took the time to write a rational and logical defense of Christian beliefs that can be shown both from reason and revelation, like the existence of God, natural law, ethics, and divine providence. Because Boethius found himself comforted by the knowledge that he was living in accordance with the truth and with reason, Boethius called this prison work of his the Consolation of Philosophy. But before I get into what Boethius has to say about divine foreknowledge, I want to make sure we have a good grasp on exactly what the problem we're talking about is, where the problem lies. You see, all Christians, and really all rational people, agree that truth cannot contradict truth. If you know that two things are true, then those two things can't be in contradiction with each other. Now, Christians know, both from divine revelation, but also from philosophy, from reason, that God has knowledge of the future before it happens, foreknowledge. Christians also know, again, both from revelation and reason, that human beings have free will. This means that there shouldn't be any contradiction between the two truths, stating that God has foreknowledge and human beings have free will, because truth cannot contradict truth. But it seems like there is a contradiction, because knowledge of the future seems to imply that the future is unchangeable. If I say that I know with 100% certainty what's going to happen tomorrow, in order for my claim to be true, in order for it not to be false, whatever's going to happen tomorrow has to be set in stone. It has to be unchangeable. So it seems that if God knows the future, then the future must be unchangeable. But if the future is unchangeable, then our future decisions are unchangeable. If it is an unchangeable truth that tomorrow I will eat 37 Ritz crackers, then tomorrow I am going to eat 37 Ritz crackers, and there's nothing I can do about it. And if I can't control how many Ritz crackers I eat, then I don't have free will. And if I don't have free will, Christianity is false. It seems then like divine providence contradicts not just the doctrine of free will, but the entire Christian project. To resolve this dilemma, Boethius points out that there is a fundamental difference between God's foreknowledge and human foreknowledge. Remember that the argument I just gave for a contradiction between knowledge of the future and free will rests on this analogy to everyday life. If I knew the future would be unchangeable. So if God knows the future must be unchangeable. Boethius' point is that that's not a good analogy. The problem with the analogy is that God's foreknowledge doesn't work really anything like how our knowledge works. This shouldn't surprise us because God is infinite and we are finite. So there's this infinite gap between us and God. So there's this infinite gap between how our knowledge works and how God's knowledge works. So how we operate and do things is infinitely different from how God operates and does things. See, the big difference between how God knows things and how we human beings know things is that we know things in time, while God knows things eternally. God exists eternally. To be eternal, says Boethius, is to have a simultaneously whole and complete possession of interminable life. This means to exist in eternity is to exist all in one moment. So while our lives play out through successive moments, God exists only in one infinite present moment, an eternal now. This means that for God, there is no time. There is no today. There is no yesterday. There is no tomorrow. All of time is contained in a single instant. God is, in the truest sense possible, outside of time. He created time and looks down on the entire series of human events from an outsider's perspective, not existing any more in one moment than in another. He exists in every moment equally, at all times. Today for God is the same as 20,000 years ago, or 20,000 years from now. If you like, you could compare God and the way he views time to a man seeing a big sprawled out painting which depicts a bunch of events from history. Unlike the people in the painting, that man doesn't exist at any one point on the painting, just like how God doesn't exist at any one point in time. He exists outside of the painting and is able to see everything happening inside it all at once because he's outside it. So for God, foreknowledge isn't really knowledge of the future. It's knowledge of the present. Knowledge of the year 2054 is just as much knowledge of the present for God as knowledge of the year 2024. God isn't like a fortune teller foreseeing events that are still in the distant future. It might seem like that from our point of view, but we need to remember that from God's perspective, seeing the future is just like seeing something play out in the present is for us. And when you think about it that way, the intuitive connection between foreknowledge and an absence of free will goes away. It disappears. When I see two people doing something in the present, I don't suddenly think that those two people don't have free will because I see what they're doing. Similarly, when God sees what, from his perspective, is the present, even if it's in the future for us, he's not in any way infringing on our free will. He's just watching us act in what for him is the present. So once again, we see that where two truths seem to contradict, the Christian tradition has taken the time to sort out the details, and that by reflecting on the nature of God and free will, the problem went away entirely. Don't underestimate the power of medieval Catholic philosophers. That's the lesson here. And if you want to learn more about medieval thinkers and other thinkers like Boethius and Thomas Aquinas that I talk about in these kind of videos, I recommend that you subscribe to my channel so that I can continue making videos like this. Thank you, and God bless.